In a quiet little neighborhood where life moved at its own peaceful pace, Marcus Thompson sat outside his modest home, basking in the warmth of a bright, sunny afternoon. The air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass, and birds chirped cheerfully from nearby trees. For Marcus, this was one of those rare moments when he could simply sit back and enjoy the beauty of the world around him, despite the challenges life had thrown his way. Marcus was in his late 30s, with kind eyes that reflected both wisdom and resilience. He had once been full of energy, always on the go, chasing dreams and making plans for the future. But an accident years ago had changed everything. A devastating car crash left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him to rely on a wheelchair for mobility. Though the journey hadn't been easy, Marcus had learned to adapt. Over time, he found new ways to bring joy into his life. Gardening became his therapy, painting his passion, and his small garden out front transformed into a vibrant patchwork of colors. On this particular day, Marcus decided to spend some time planting new flowers along the sidewalk. The sun felt good on his skin, and there was something comforting about working with the soil, feeling it between his fingers. It reminded him of simpler times, before life took such an unexpected turn. As he carefully arranged pots and dug holes for the plants, he hummed a soft tune under his breath, lost in thought. The tranquility of the moment was suddenly shattered by the loud roar of engines. Startled, Marcus looked up just in time to see a group of bikers speeding down the street. Their motorcycles thundered like beasts unleashed, drowning out the gentle sounds of nature. They wore leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias, their faces hidden behind sunglasses and bandanas. To anyone watching, they looked tough, untouchable, and more than a little intimidating. One of the bikers slowed down as he passed Marcus, circling back until he came to a stop right beside him. His companions followed suit, forming a loose semicircle around Marcus. At first, Marcus thought maybe they were lost or needed directions, but then the lead biker leaned forward on his bike, smirking as he removed his sunglasses to get a better look at the man in the wheelchair. Well, the biker drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. What do we have here? Looks like someone's having a lazy day. His friends laughed loudly, the sound harsh and grating against the otherwise serene atmosphere. Marcus forced himself to stay calm, though his heart began to race. He had dealt with difficult people before, but something about the way these men carried themselves set off warning bells in his mind. Still, he chose not to engage, focusing instead on steadying his breathing and keeping his expression neutral. The lead biker wasn't done yet. "Hey, buddy," he called out, leaning even closer. "You know what they say about guys in wheelchairs? You're probably just sitting there because you couldn't handle walking, huh?" This comment earned another round of raucous laughter from the group. One of them chimed in, "Or maybe he's just too scared to stand up." Marcus clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into his palms. He hated situations like this, not because he was afraid of confrontation, but because he knew responding would only escalate things. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on the flower pot in front of him, pretending to ignore them. Maybe if he stayed quiet long enough, they'd grow bored and leave. But the bikers weren't interested in leaving. If anything, their taunts grew louder and meaner. Another rider revved his engine dangerously close to Marcus, causing the wheelchair to wobble slightly. Marcus instinctively grabbed the armrests to steady himself, his knuckles turning white. The bikers erupted in laughter again, clearly amused by how easily they could unsettle him. "Aw, look at him," one of them jeered. "He thinks he's gonna fall over. Don't worry, buddy, we'll catch you if we feel like it." The cruel words stung, but Marcus refused to let them see his pain. Inside, however, memories began to surface. Memories of all the times he'd faced discrimination and prejudice because of his disability and the color of his skin. People often underestimated him, assuming he was weak or helpless. What they didn't realize was that beneath his calm exterior lay a strength forged through years of adversity. As the harassment continued, one of the bikers stepped things up a notch. With a smirk, he reached out and gave Marcus's wheelchair a slight push. The chair teetered precariously, threatening to tip over entirely. Marcus managed to regain control just in time, but the message was clear. These men weren't going to stop anytime soon. Despite the fear creeping into his chest, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. He could call the police, but deep down he knew that wouldn't solve the immediate problem. These bikers thrived on chaos and intimidation. They wouldn't hesitate to escalate further if challenged directly. No, he needed a different approach, one that would catch them off guard and put an end to their antics once and for all. Reaching into his pocket, Marcus pulled out his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he dialed a number from memory. The bikers watched curiously, their sneers fading slightly as they tried to figure out what he was doing. When Marcus finally ended the call, he glanced up at them, with a faint smile, one that sent chills running down their spines. "What's so funny?" the lead biker demanded, his tone less confident now. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but unreadable. Whatever he had done, it was clear that the tables were about to turn, and the bikers had no idea what was coming next. The bikers stared at Marcus, their earlier bravado beginning to waver. His calm demeanor and mysterious smile unnerved them. They had expected anger, fear, or maybe even tears, anything that would fuel their sense of power. But this quiet confidence? It was unsettling. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the distant chirping of birds and the faint hum of traffic from a nearby road. "What did you just do?" the lead biker finally asked, his voice sharper than before. There was an edge of uncertainty in his tone now, though. He tried hard to mask it with aggression. He glanced at his friends as if seeking reassurance, but they looked just as confused as he did. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he adjusted himself slightly in his wheelchair, making sure he was comfortable. Then, with deliberate slowness, he placed his phone back into his pocket. Every movement seemed calculated, almost theatrical, as if he wanted them to feel the weight of his silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and measured. "You'll find out soon enough," Marcus said simply, his words laced with a quiet certainty that made the bikers uneasy. The lead biker scowled, clearly irritated by the lack of answers. "You think you're smart, huh? Calling someone won't save you." Despite his tough talk, there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He glanced around nervously as if expecting trouble to appear out of nowhere. Marcus ignored him and went back to tending to his flowers. He picked up a small trowel and began gently patting soil around one of the newly planted blooms. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like he was completely unfazed by the situation. But inside, his mind was racing. Years of training and experience had taught him how to stay composed under pressure, and right now maintaining that composure was key. He knew exactly who he had called, and what would happen next. The bikers exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. One of them muttered something under his breath about leaving, but the leader shot him a glare that silenced him instantly. None of them wanted to admit defeat, especially not in front of someone they viewed as powerless. So they lingered, their motorcycles idling loudly, creating a cloud of exhaust fumes that drifted lazily through the air. Minutes ticked by, and the tension grew thicker. Just when it seemed like the bikers might lose interest and ride off, the sound of sirens pierced the air. At first it was faint, barely audible over the rumble of their engines, but within seconds, the noise grew louder, more urgent. The bikers froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. "Cops?" one of them muttered, panic creeping into his voice. "Did you call the cops?" Marcus didn't answer. He continued working on his flowers, pretending not to notice the growing chaos around him. The bikers scrambled to mount their bikes, revving their engines as they prepared to flee. But before they could make a move, multiple police cars came, speeding down the street, lights flashing and sirens blaring. Behind them followed unmarked vehicles with tinted windows, their presence adding an ominous layer to the scene. The convoy skidded to a halt near Marcus's house, blocking the bikers' escape route. Doors opened, and officers poured out, their movements swift and coordinated. What caught everyone off guard, however, was the fact that these weren't ordinary cops. Some wore tactical gear, while others sported suits and earpieces, exuding an air of authority that sent shivers down the bikers' spines. These weren't local law enforcement. They were federal agents. One of the agents, a tall man with a commanding presence, stepped forward and approached Marcus. Unlike the bikers who had mocked and taunted him, the agent addressed Marcus with respect. "Sir, are you okay?" he asked, his voice firm yet kind. Marcus nodded, pointing toward the group of bikers without saying a word. The agent followed, his gaze, and gave a curt nod. Without hesitation, he signaled to his team and the agent sprang into action. Within moments, the bikers were surrounded, their motorcycles confiscated and pushed aside. Orders were barked, and the once cocky gang found themselves face down on the pavement, hands cuffed behind their backs. "What is this? We didn't do anything," the lead biker shouted, his voice trembling with fear. His bravado had vanished, entirely, replaced by sheer panic. His companions echoed his protests, their earlier arrogance crumbling under the weight of the situation. The agents ignored their pleas, instead focusing on securing the area. As the bikers were hauled to their feet and loaded into waiting squad cars, one of the agents turned back to Marcus. "Thank you for alerting us," he said sincerely. "We've been tracking this group for months. You've done your community a great service today." Marcus nodded again, his expression unreadable. Inside, however, he felt a mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and a lingering sadness that such people existed in the world. Still, he kept his thoughts to himself, knowing that his actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. As the commotion died down and the last of the bikers was taken away, Marcus returned to his gardening. The sun still shone brightly overhead, casting golden rays across the freshly planted flowers. Neighbors began peeking out of their homes, curiosity drawing them outside. Some approached Marcus cautiously, asking what had happened. He offered brief explanations, keeping the details vague. All he cared about was that justice had been served and that his peaceful afternoon could finally resume. Unbeknownst to most, Marcus's decision to make that phone call stemmed from more than just quick thinking. Years ago, long before his accident, he had served as an intelligence officer in the military. Though his career had been cut short by the crash, his skills and connections remained intact. When he recognized the insignia on the bikers' jackets, a symbol associated with a notorious outlaw motorcycle club, he knew exactly who to contact. The task force monitoring organized crime in the region had been eager to take down the gang, and Marcus's tip provided the breakthrough they needed. For Marcus, the entire ordeal reinforced a lesson he had learned long ago. Appearances can be deceiving. To the bikers, he may have looked like an easy target, a disabled man sitting alone in his garden. But beneath the surface lay a wealth of knowledge, resourcefulness, and determination. And sometimes, all it takes is one bold move to turn the tables and remind the world that true strength comes from within. As the last of the bikers was loaded into the squad cars, the neighborhood buzzed with a mix of shock and relief. Neighbors who had been watching from their windows or cautiously stepping outside began to gather near Marcus's house. Some whispered among themselves, while others approached him directly, eager to understand what had just unfolded. Marcus, however, remained calm and composed, his focus still on the flowers he had been planting earlier. It was as if the chaos around him hadn't shaken his inner peace at all. One of the federal agents walked over to Marcus again, this time holding a clipboard. "Sir," he said respectfully, "we'll need a formal statement from you about what happened here today. Can we take a few moments to discuss it?" Marcus nodded, setting down his gardening tools and wheeling himself toward the agent. Though he wasn't thrilled about reliving the incident, he knew it was necessary. As they spoke, the agent listened intently, jotting down notes. Marcus recounted everything: the bikers' arrival, their taunts, the way they had pushed his wheelchair, and finally, the phone call that brought the authorities rushing in. He kept his tone even and factual, leaving out any hint of emotion. To him, this wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about doing what was right. While Marcus gave his statement, other agents were busy securing evidence. They photographed the scene, collected items left behind by the bikers, and took statements from witnesses. The insignia on the bikers' jackets proved to be crucial. It matched descriptions linked to a dangerous outlaw motorcycle gang involved in illegal activities across several states. This wasn't just a random group of troublemakers looking for kicks. These men were part of something much bigger, and their arrest would have far-reaching consequences. The lead biker, now sitting handcuffed in the back of a squad car, glared out the window at Marcus. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the cool breeze. Gone was the cocky smirk he had worn earlier. Instead, there was pure terror in his eyes. He muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. How could this have happened? Just moments ago, he and his crew had felt untouchable, like kings of the road. Now they were prisoners, stripped of their freedom and dignity. Inside another squad car, one of the younger bikers broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face as he begged the officers for leniency. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what they were planning," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "I joined because I thought it'd be fun. Rides, parties, that kind of thing. I didn't sign up for this." His words fell on deaf ears. The agents weren't interested in excuses. They were focused on dismantling the network these men belonged to. Each biker was processed individually, their personal belongings searched and cataloged. Phones, wallets, and even patches torn from their jackets were carefully examined. Every piece of information mattered, no matter how small it seemed. Back at Marcus's house, the crowd of neighbors continued to grow. A few people brought chairs and set them up near the sidewalk, creating an impromptu gathering spot. Others offered Marcus drinks or snacks, though he politely declined. Despite the attention, he stayed grounded, deflecting praise with modesty. "I only did what anyone else would have done," he said repeatedly, brushing off compliments as if they were nothing. Among the onlookers was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived 2 doors down. She had always admired Marcus's resilience and kindness, but had never spoken to him much beyond exchanging pleasantries. Now she stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice trembling slightly. Thank you for standing up to those awful men. You protected us all." Her words struck a chord with the others, and soon, more voices joined in. People thanked Marcus not just for calling the authorities, but for being brave enough to act when most would have hesitated. For years, many in the neighborhood had turned a blind eye to injustice, too afraid or indifferent to get involved. But Marcus's actions reminded them that courage doesn't require grand gestures. It simply requires doing what's right, even when it's hard. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, the agents wrapped up their work. One of them approached Marcus once more, this time with a look of gratitude on his face. "We can't thank you enough for your help today," he said sincerely. "Your quick thinking and knowledge made all the difference. We're going to raid their headquarters tonight, and because of you, we'll catch them red-handed." Marcus nodded, absorbing the weight of the agent's words. He hadn't expected his simple phone call to spark such a massive operation, but he understood its significance. These bikers weren't just bullies causing trouble in a quiet neighborhood. They were part of a larger web of crime that endangered countless lives. By exposing them, Marcus had unknowingly become a key player in bringing down a dangerous organization. Before leaving, the agents handed Marcus a card with contact information in case he needed anything in the future. They assured him that his safety was their priority and promised to keep him updated on the investigation. As the convoy of vehicles pulled away, sirens blaring once more, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could be after such an event. That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch watching the stars appear, one by one he reflected on the day's events. It had started like any other, a peaceful afternoon spent outdoors, but had quickly spiraled into something extraordinary. He thought about the bikers, their arrogance giving way to fear as reality crashed down around them. He thought about the neighbors who had rallied around him, offering support and admiration. And he thought about the task force, working tirelessly to ensure justice was served. Despite everything, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The bikers' arrest might have resolved one issue, but it also highlighted deeper problems within society, issues of prejudice, entitlement, and the abuse of power. For Marcus, this experience reinforced his belief in the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Life had thrown him challenges before, and he had risen above them each time. Today was no different. As he wheeled himself back inside, Marcus decided to channel his energy into something positive. Perhaps he could use this moment to inspire others, to show them that no matter who you are or where you come from, you have the power to make a difference. After all, sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. And for Marcus Thompson, that realization was worth more than any applause or recognition. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting warm golden light across his small living room. It was a peaceful start to the day, but the events of the previous afternoon lingered in his mind like an unshakable echo. He made himself a cup of coffee and wheeled himself out onto the porch, where he could see the neighborhood coming alive with activity. News of the biker's arrest had spread quickly, and it seemed everyone in the community was talking about it. Neighbors who rarely interacted were now standing in clusters, discussing what had happened. Some recounted details they had witnessed firsthand, while others shared snippets they'd heard from friends or seen on social media. The story had even caught the attention of local news outlets, and by mid-morning, reporters began arriving at Marcus's house. At first, Marcus was hesitant to speak with them. He didn't want the spotlight, he just wanted to go back to his quiet life. But as more people approached him, thanking him for his bravery and asking questions about how he had managed to bring down such a dangerous group, he realized that this moment was bigger than him. It wasn't just about one man standing up to bullies. It was about sending a message to anyone who thought they could intimidate or harm others without consequences. One reporter, a young woman named Lisa, stood out among the crowd. She introduced herself politely and explained that she worked for a local news station. "Mr. Thompson," she said gently, "your actions yesterday have inspired so many people. Would you be willing to share your story? Not just what happened, but why you did what you did?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said finally. "But let's make one thing clear. I'm not looking for fame or praise. I did what I thought was right, and if sharing my story helps someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves, then I'll do it." Lisa smiled warmly and pulled out her notebook. As Marcus spoke, his words painted a vivid picture of resilience and determination. He talked about his accident, the years he spent rebuilding his life, and how he learned to adapt to new challenges. He described the bikers' harassment in detail, emphasizing not just their cruelty but also the underlying prejudice that fueled their behavior. And when asked about the phone call that led to their arrest, Marcus revealed a piece of his past that stunned everyone listening. "I used to serve in the military," he explained, his voice steady but tinged with nostalgia. "Before my accident, I worked in intelligence. My job was to gather information and help dismantle criminal organizations. When I saw those bikers' jackets, I recognized the insignia immediately. It matched descriptions of a gang we'd been tracking for years. I knew exactly who to call because I still have contacts in law enforcement. All I did was pass along the information. The rest was up to them." The revelation left the crowd speechless. To think that the quiet man tending to his garden had once been part of such high-stakes operations was almost unimaginable. Yet as Marcus continued speaking, it became clear that his military background was only part of the story. What truly set him apart was his mindset, his refusal to let fear dictate his actions no matter the circumstances. As word of Marcus's interview spread, the story gained national attention. Social media platforms lit up with posts praising his courage and calling for greater awareness of issues like discrimination and organized crime. Hashtags like the Stand With Marcus and Courage in Action trended online, sparking conversations about how ordinary individuals can make extraordinary impacts. People shared stories of their own experiences with bullying or injustice, drawing inspiration from Marcus's example. Meanwhile, the task force moved swiftly to capitalize on the lead Marcus had provided. That same night, federal agents raided the outlaw motorcycle gang's headquarters, uncovering a treasure trove of evidence. Stash houses filled with illegal weapons, bags of narcotics, and stacks of cash were discovered, along with detailed records of planned operations. Several high-ranking members of the gang were arrested, including leaders who had evaded capture for years. Others, realizing they were cornered, agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. Back in the neighborhood, life slowly returned to normal, but it was a different kind of normal. The incident had brought the community closer together, fostering a sense of unity and vigilance that hadn't existed before. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now greeted each other warmly, checking in to ensure everyone felt safe. Community meetings were organized to discuss ways to prevent similar incidents in the future, and Marcus found himself playing an unexpected role as a spokesperson for positive change. Despite the newfound attention, Marcus remained humble. He turned down offers for interviews with major networks and declined invitations to speak at large events. Instead, he focused on using his platform to uplift others. He partnered with local organizations that supported disabled individuals and victims of hate crimes, offering guidance and encouragement wherever he could. His garden became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring others to nurture beauty even in the face of adversity. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch watching the sunset, Mrs. Henderson stopped by with a plate of homemade cookies. "I baked these for you," she said shyly, handing him the plate, "to say thank you again. You've done so much for all of us." Marcus accepted the gift with a grateful smile. "You don't have to keep thanking me," he replied softly. "We're all in this together. If anything, I should thank you for believing in me, for standing with me." Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "No, Mr. Thompson. You remind us that we're stronger than we think. You showed us that even when things seem impossible, there's always a way to fight back. That's something we'll never forget." As she walked away, Marcus looked out at the neighborhood bathed in the soft glow of twilight. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of peace, not because of the recognition he'd received, but because he knew he had made a difference. Life would always have its challenges, but moments like this reminded him that every action, no matter how small, mattered. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Marcus leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he would continue to live with purpose, using his experiences to inspire others and create a better world. One flower, one conversation, and one act of courage at a time. By the end of the week, Marcus's story had become a national sensation. News outlets across the country featured segments about him, highlighting not just his bravery during the confrontation with the bikers, but also his resilience in overcoming personal adversity. Social media was flooded with messages of support, admiration, and gratitude from people who saw him as a symbol of hope and strength. Yet, despite all the attention, Marcus remained grounded, choosing to focus on what truly mattered, making a difference in his community. One morning, as he watered the flowers in his garden, a delivery truck pulled up outside his house. The driver stepped out holding a large box wrapped in brown paper. "Special delivery for Marcus Thompson," the man announced with a grin. Curious, Marcus wheeled himself over to sign for the package. Inside, he found dozens of letters, drawings, and small gifts sent by strangers from all over the country. Some were heartfelt notes thanking him for inspiring them. Others were colorful paintings created by children who said they wanted to be brave like him when they grew up. Among the items was a letter from a young boy named Ethan, who wrote about being bullied at school because of his stutter. "Dear Mr. Thompson," the letter began, "I used to think I was weak because kids made fun of me. But after hearing your story, I realized that being strong isn't about fighting back. It's about standing tall no matter what. Thank you for showing me that." Marcus read the letter several times, his eyes misting slightly. He couldn't believe how far-reaching his actions had been. What started as a simple act of self-defense had grown into something much bigger, a movement of sorts, encouraging others to find their own courage and stand against injustice. Determined to keep the momentum going, Marcus decided to host an open house at his home. inviting neighbors and anyone else interested to come together and discuss ways to make their community safer and more inclusive. On the day of the event, Marcus's front yard transformed into a vibrant gathering space. Colorful banners hung between trees, and tables were set up with refreshments and informational pamphlets about local advocacy groups. People of all ages poured in. Some were longtime residents of the neighborhood, while others had traveled from nearby towns to meet the man behind the inspiring story. There were speeches, workshops, and even art activities designed to foster creativity and connection among attendees. During one particularly moving session, Marcus shared his thoughts about the importance of standing united against hate and prejudice. "We often think we're alone in our struggles," he said, addressing the crowd. "But the truth is there's always someone willing to help if you reach out. And sometimes, helping others starts with believing in yourself first." His words resonated deeply with everyone present, sparking conversations that continued long after the event ended. As the weeks passed, Marcus noticed subtle but meaningful changes in the neighborhood. Neighbors formed a community watch program to ensure everyone felt safe. Local schools partnered with advocacy organizations to educate students about bullying prevention and inclusivity. Even businesses got involved, offering discounts or donations to support causes Marcus championed. It was as if the entire area had been infused with a renewed sense of purpose, all thanks to one man's decision to take a stand. But Marcus didn't stop there. Inspired by the positive response to his efforts, he decided to expand his impact beyond the neighborhood. Drawing on his artistic talents, he began creating murals around the city that promoted themes of unity, resilience, and kindness. Each mural told a story of overcoming challenges, embracing diversity, and finding beauty in unexpected places. One depicted a tree growing through cracks in concrete, symbolizing strength in adversity. Another showed hands of different colors, intertwined, representing solidarity and acceptance. The murals quickly became landmarks, attracting visitors and sparking discussions wherever they appeared. Schools organized field trips to see them, using them as teaching tools to inspire students to think critically about social issues. Local artists joined forces with Marcus, collaborating on new projects that celebrated the diversity and vibrancy of their community. Together, they turned blank walls into canvases of hope and change. In addition to his artwork, Marcus started speaking at smaller events, community centers, libraries, and youth programs, sharing his experiences and encouraging others to use their voices for good. He spoke candidly about his accident, his military service, and the lessons he'd learned along the way. "Life will throw obstacles your way," he often said, "but those obstacles don't define you. How you respond to them does." His message struck a chord with audiences of all ages. Teenagers dealing with peer pressure found solace in his advice to stay true to themselves. Parents struggling to guide their children through difficult times appreciated his insights on resilience and perseverance. Even adults facing career setbacks or personal hardships drew inspiration from his unwavering optimism. Despite his growing influence, Marcus never lost sight of why he started this journey: to create a better world, one small step at a time. He continued tending to his garden, painting murals, and lending a listening ear to anyone who needed it. His humility and authenticity endeared him to everyone he met, proving that true leadership isn't about titles or recognition. It's about making a lasting impact. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, he reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful afternoon with the bikers. Back then, he had simply wanted to protect himself and his neighborhood. Now, he had become a catalyst for change, inspiring countless individuals to embrace courage and compassion in their own lives. And yet, as proud as he was of what he had accomplished, Marcus knew the work wasn't done. There would always be more challenges to face, more injustices to fight, and more hearts to touch. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride, savoring the knowledge that his actions had sparked a ripple effect that would continue, spreading for years to come. As the stars blinked to life above him, Marcus smiled softly, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. Life had taught him many lessons, but perhaps the most important one was this: No matter how dark the world might seem at times, there is always light waiting to shine through, if only we have the courage to let it. Months had passed since the day Marcus stood up to the bikers, but the impact of his actions continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. The neighborhood had transformed into a tight-knit community where people looked out for one another, and Marcus's garden, once just a quiet corner of beauty, had become a symbol of hope and resilience. It wasn't unusual now to see neighbors stopping by to chat with him, children playing nearby, or even strangers visiting to leave notes of gratitude at the foot of his colorful murals. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Marcus received an invitation that took him by surprise. A local university had reached out, asking him to deliver a keynote speech at their annual leadership conference. At first, Marcus hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something he sought out. He preferred working behind the scenes, quietly planting seeds of change. But when he read the theme of the event, courage in action, inspiring change through everyday heroes, he realized this was an opportunity to share his story on a larger scale. Maybe, just maybe, he could inspire others to take small steps toward making big differences. The day of the conference arrived, and Marcus wheeled himself onto the stage to thunderous applause. The auditorium was packed with students, faculty members, and community leaders, all eager to hear from the man whose courage had sparked a national conversation about justice and kindness. As Marcus adjusted the microphone and glanced at the sea of faces before him, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He took a deep breath, smiled warmly, and began to speak. "I never set out to be a hero," he started, his voice steady and sincere. "In fact, I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary that day. I was simply trying to protect myself and my home. But sometimes, ordinary moments lead to extraordinary outcomes." He went on to recount the events of that afternoon, the taunts, the insults, the fear he felt, but also the clarity that came with knowing he had the power to act. He spoke about recognizing the biker's insignia and understanding its significance, not because he was special, but because life had given him experiences that prepared him for such a moment. "Knowledge is a tool," he said, "and how we use it defines us." As he shared his story, Marcus emphasized the importance of resilience, not just in facing external challenges, but in overcoming internal doubts. He talked about his accident, the years of physical therapy, and the emotional toll of adapting to a new way of life. "There were days when I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again," he admitted. "But every time I planted a flower or picked up a paintbrush, I reminded myself that growth takes time. Healing isn't linear, and neither is progress. What matters is that you keep moving forward, even if it's just one step at a time." The audience listened intently, hanging on every word. When Marcus finished speaking, the room erupted in applause, standing ovations echoing throughout the hall. Students lined up afterward to ask questions, shake his hand, and thank him for his words of wisdom. One young woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "I've been struggling to find my place in the world," she confessed. "But hearing your story made me realize that I don't need to wait for the perfect moment to make a difference. I can start right now." That evening, as Marcus returned home, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. The conference had reminded him of the power of storytelling, not just his own, but everyone's. Each person carried within them a unique perspective shaped by their struggles and triumphs. By sharing those stories, they could inspire others to believe in themselves and their ability to create change. Back in his neighborhood, Marcus decided to expand his efforts further. He launched a mentorship program aimed at helping disabled individuals and marginalized youth build confidence and discover their potential. Every Saturday, groups of teenagers gathered in his backyard to learn gardening, painting, and other creative skills. They laughed, shared meals, and worked together on projects that beautified the community while fostering a sense of belonging. For many of these kids, Marcus became more than a mentor. He became a friend, a role model, and a source of unwavering support. One chilly December afternoon, as snow blanketed the ground, Marcus hosted a holiday celebration in his garden. Strings, Of lights twinkled among the bare branches and hot cocoa warmed cold hands. Neighbors brought dishes to share, filling long tables with homemade treats. Laughter filled the air as children played games and adults exchanged stories. In the center of it all stood Marcus, surrounded by people whose lives he had touched, in ways big and small. Among the guests was Mrs. Henderson, who handed Marcus a framed photograph. "I thought you might like this," she said softly. The picture showed Marcus kneeling beside Ethan, the boy who had written him the heartfelt letter months earlier. Behind them stood a mural Marcus had painted, a vibrant scene of people holding hands beneath a bright sun. The caption underneath read, "Together we shine." Marcus stared at the photo, emotion welling up inside him. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with gratitude. "This means more than I can say." As the years went by, Marcus's influence continued to grow. His murals appeared in cities across the country, each one telling a story of unity and perseverance. Schools adopted anti-bullying programs inspired by his advocacy work, and organizations supporting disabled individuals credited him with raising awareness and fostering inclusivity. Yet despite all the accolades and recognition, Marcus remained humble, always deflecting praise onto the community that had embraced him. Looking back on his journey, Marcus realized that his greatest achievement wasn't dismantling a dangerous gang or becoming a public figure. It was proving that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, could make a difference. His wheelchair had once been seen as a limitation, but it had become a testament to the strength of the human spirit. His scars, both visible and invisible, told a story of survival and transformation, and his quiet determination had ignited a spark that refused to fade. On a quiet spring evening, Marcus sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air smelled of fresh earth and blooming flowers, and the sound of laughter drifted over from a nearby house. He thought about how far he and the neighborhood had come since that fateful afternoon with the bikers. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been rich with meaning. Marcus smiled to himself, feeling a deep sense of contentment. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Every action, no matter how small, mattered. Whether it was planting a single flower, painting a mural, or standing up to bullies, the choices we make shape the world around us, and sometimes those choices inspire others to do the same. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Marcus leaned back in his chair, savoring the peace of the moment. He had faced fear, adversity, and prejudice, yet he had emerged stronger and wiser. More importantly, he had shown others that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite it. For Marcus Thompson, life was no longer about waiting for storms to pass. It was about learning to dance in the rain,